I want to talk a little bit about effects, and the reason I haven't talked too much about them, I don't know if I have it all yet, is because if I show people effects too early on, they start throwing effects all over everything, and it looks cheesy. So, but they can be really handy. So if we go here to layer, and then layer style, these are sort of your basic things you see a lot, and when they're used correctly, they're great. So let's go to Bevel Emboss, and you're going to get this dialog box for all these, okay? So this one, let's pick something here. Now, I don't know if you can see it up there. See how it's giving it a little bit of a bevel? Right there, right there. Now, I can dial these in. I can soften it up. There's a whole bunch of things I can do. I can even change the profile of it. This right here is showing you the side profile of it. Now, I'm going to tell you all these things, but with effects, you need to go in and play with them. You're going to see they're fairly simple. They're pretty straightforward, at least initially. I can change my lighting direction right here. See that? So it's casting the shadow over to the right now. What else? Opacity. So one of these is the highlight opacity. So I could, that's just going to be, it is what it is. And then there's the shadow opacity, and you can see I can dial it down if I need to do that. Because if you push it too hard like that, it's not going to look good. And we got to use these things only when we need them. Another one that's common here is drop shadow. So let's pull it, and here's the distance. You see that? That's the distance. Let's put the spread on it, which is just going to go how hard and soft it is, basically. And then the size of it, which also is a hard and soft thing. And I can kind of, again, I can change the angle, throw it over to the right a little bit, and I can throw that distance off a little more. And I get the same thing here. I got a contour. What else? You got a blend mode here, just like you do in your overlays panel. So it's really simple. You can also do an outer glow here. Be careful with the outer glow. That can get cheesy really fast, right? Sometimes it's great. I tend to do an outer glow without doing this and do it by hand, but that's a different thing. So you have a bunch of different things. You see these all the time. So simple. I want you to start playing with them a little bit today. So I want you to start using, like we talked about last time, we'll start using adjustment layers to work smarter. Now we'll start using this if it makes sense. I want you guys, because you guys should be at the point now where you're thinking about type a little more. Let's really pick nice type. That's why I put that folder in there. There's a whole bunch of type in there. Okay, and another thing, which is just sort of an extension of, so when I look at this country stuff, I think it could, sometimes it's nice to, she's doing a good job here, by the way. Neither one of these people were in this photo. And she's doing a nice job of getting them to feel like they're in that photo. One thing is this little cast shadow. There's a little bit of this red reflected light here in the side of his face. There's even, you can't see it up here, there's a little bit like on his shirt, a little bit, real subtle. And then same thing in her hair right here. There's just a little bit of hint of red right there because we've got that here. Now, why do we do that? We do that because if you just, okay, you're cutting people out and putting them in a scene. Now, you don't want them to look like they're cut out and put in a scene. So some of the tools we're going to use, which we've already talked about, is like going in here, like right here, maybe I'd come back in and maybe here. And anywhere where it looks like I cut it, I'm going to soften the edge. Or if it's hair, I might take a smudge tool and just pull out a strand of hair maybe. So I'm putting that back over the background, okay? And then things like ambient light or bounce light, that's really intense color behind them. So it's going to bounce around a little bit. He's got a white hat on. It's going to bounce around in there. And where he turned his head sideways, where she put the reddish bounce light in there, that's where it's going to catch it. Now, if he had a really super red shirt on, like the red color of that amp behind him, that's going to bounce up into your lower part of your face. You can do it really subtly, but it's going to really help that, okay? Like if we were putting his head on a different body or something like that, we could bounce that light around. And then softening edges and that sort of thing. We want to make sure that we're putting these things into their real environment. But what I was going to say is, let's open this. I'm going to open this one. I tend to just do this where I open it up and then I just pull this out of the dock and I just drag it over. Okay, so these are high-res files. Now what I like about this one, I think it's this one, yeah, is the edges of it, if you notice, are a little darker around the edges. So what I'm going to do is just a variation on what we've already done, because now we should be far enough along where we're starting to, I like this part where you guys get it all put together, or I like this stage of it. Now I can start pushing it and tweaking it and adding new things and pushing my design further. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to play around with my overlays again. I think you're getting the common denominator that overlays are pretty important. So let's go. I want to get some of that texture in there. Now I could go, another thing I can do here, let's say I find one I like, and I just want some texture like that. I don't want it here so much. So I might just, there's a bunch of ways I can do this, but one way I can do it, which is really simple, is I could just take a really soft brush, really pull down the opacity, make sure it's as soft as I can get it, and just kind of lift this out around here and just keep that texture around the sides. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now another thing that does, if I can find the right texture, because sometimes people will do this, well everybody does, whether they'll really leave the texture in there. I'm going to go back to a little bit of overlay. And I always have to just run through here and find it. So sometimes what I have to do too is I have to take my image and desaturate it so I don't have the color affecting the layer underneath it. So sometimes I have to do that if I just want to have the texture. By the way, you'll see texture packs like this. Just make your own, because all you got to do is go take a high-res photo of interesting textures. Or like crumble up a piece of paper, flatten it out, scan it. And you're going to get a nice parchment-y texture. Or I just saw one where it's all textures the guy built off his old t-shirts. You know, just cool textures, right? You don't need to, that's something you really don't need to buy. You can just make them. I used to go around shooting things like rotted wood and all that kind of stuff and use that kind of stuff where you can have something. Yeah. How are you going to the, okay. So here's the thing, if you want to scroll through your overlays, you have to be on this tool right here, which is just your move tool, which if you hit V, it'll take you to that. And for some reason, this won't work unless you're in that tool. And then you just go Shift plus or Shift minus. So if I want to go back, Shift minus, if I want to go forward, so I can just scroll through these real quick. Okay, I'm going to find a couple texture examples. And I put a bunch of textures in there if you want to play around with that. I think it might be a good choice for yours. And if you have the right kind of thing, it might work. Okay? Here's the thing that you're going to start doing right now as you move closer to finish. This is what I want you to start really plussing and plussing and plussing. Okay? So I've always had people early into this, or like last week or something, they'll go, I'm done. It's like, no, you're not. I want to push it. I want to push it further. I don't want it just done. I want a good design. And I want it. You know, if you guys go through this, you're learning all these basic tool sets right here. You can see you can do a lot of image making with this. Okay, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's play around with that. I put that folder in there, and I put the whole fonts folder in there. If you guys don't take that fonts folder, you're nuts.
Where is it at again?
It's on, I put it on Canvas. There's a link.
On Canvas, okay.
Everything I do goes through Canvas.
How do we import fonts folder?
Import it? You can just do this, look. So here's my fonts. I mean, there's a lot of ways, and people usually used to like to use whatever font management tool they use. But for our purposes, let's say I come in here and I go, now you can, by the way, you can click a font, hit spacebar, and it'll give you a preview. But if I like that, you can click spacebar for anything, it'll give you a preview. I just double click it and I hit install font, and now it's going to put it in here through Font Suitcase or whatever it is. Okay, simple. But you guys got to remember this, if you put a font in here and we're working with it, and then you go home and you don't have that font, you don't have that font. So you got to take it with you. But I would just take that whole font folder. because then you instantly have a font set. A lot of these I bought already, and they're good fonts. They're really good fonts. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go. We should be starting to move towards finish.